Hello everybody, nice to have you here. Today we'll talk about the architecture, and I want to propose this quite interesting format, and I hope it will be interesting for everybody. From today on, I wanna make the new series of videos where I will talk about the real life architectures of Adobe Commerce systems. It shall not necessarily be Adobe or like fully Adobe Commerce stack. It can be anything, and I will be happy if you have a very nice ideas and you work with different architectures, because you for sure working much more outside altogether than me alone here. Then reach me out and we will record the video together where you can present and talk about your architecture, where we can discuss it and have a look on possible solutions are out there, how to build different approaches, how to choose the storefront technology, how you connect in ERP systems, how you implement in third-party requirements, and so on and so on. So yeah, before I will start to the topic of this particular video and the architecture I want to present you today, please don't forget to drop me a note or comment or find me any other way if you have anything interesting to share, and we will do it together. So thanks a lot for listening for this small intro. And today I want to start with our first architecture. If you don't want to listen to me and you prefer to read it, you can do it because it's available on Adobe blog perspective articles, and you can find the link down the video just to have a look on it. And today I will go through the architecture I described there, and we will have a look together how it can be implemented and how was it implemented. One of the most interesting parts of all this project was it was one of the first projects for us when we tried to be microservice or Adobe App Builder first when we integrated Adobe Commerce system. And that was also one of the first projects for us when we used the delivery services for commerce. So let's jump in. We have the first step. We have usually the decision that have to be made before you start in every project, and for us it was more or less easier because the decision already came or technology stack already came in, so I will not focus on this. I just will tell that as a storefront we had Adobe Delivery Services was one of the projects for us. We have Adobe Commerce as a backend system. We have Adobe Experience Manager as a CMS system, so Adobe Commerce in this case is a headless. It's not managing the content, only the catalog and the checkout experience. We have PIM and ERP system. So we have PIM for stock availability, and we have ERP system for the customer management and customer export import. There was also some small minor other integration, but it's not part of the bigger landscape. And as this picture is not much more interesting, we can jump into the global architecture. So as part of the integration, we have here, there is some agenda here. We have this in blue marked the third-party systems that had to be integrated. It's an ERP, it's a PIM, it's an SSO integration that's also have to be done. And we have the third-party services for the company validations. This pink one is Adobe stack. The green ones is an Adobe Builder modules we built. So what our proposal was? Our proposal was try to find the golden middle when we're thinking if we have to build something with Adobe Builder, or we want to keep it standard as PHP extension within the Adobe Commerce Core. And that's how it's ended. So we ended up in a bunch of the Adobe Builder functionality that was moved out. And we have still some of the module, at least in this case, it's one of the biggest one, is the SSO integration that was still part of the Adobe Commerce as a PHP extension. There was a couple of small others which been a very minor, and I'll not focus on them because that's, if you look on the code base, it was really the big bunch of the PHP extension. All other was built as out of process. So we have Adobe Commerce. You have Adobe Commerce that's managing the orders, managing the products, so quite standard setup, but in headless mode. Then we have Adobe API Mesh, which being the layer between the front end and Adobe Commerce. So at the beginning of the project, API Mesh for sure just loaded everything from Adobe Commerce and from the catalog service of Adobe, because we're going to use Adobe Delivery Services, which work natively only with catalog service endpoints. Then we have one big bunch of work is an SSO, as I already said. Then we have one more feature that have to be implemented is the we have to display the product availability depends on the third-party system, so it's not stored on Adobe Commerce. Then we have the small block. It's for the content pre-rendering. It's not really the architectural decision. It's part of the Adobe Edge delivery services, which is optional but still nice to have, which will pre-render you the content for much faster load in the PTP pages. And on this one I will not focus. It's not part of the architectural decision to be made. It just have to be there. Then we have company validation endpoint. So that's an endpoint which validate company if the customer entered the real data. And then we have order export, which is quite common. And I believe if you're working with Adobe Commerce integrations, you would see it on almost on every project. But number one, and for us was the biggest one, if not thinking about the storefront integration, which is again not part of the architectural decision, it's an SSO integration. So we need to authorize user against third-party system when he's trying to log in via the front end. But we still want to keep the customer data within Adobe Commerce, that Adobe Commerce is also authorizing and have the correct token issued, that customer can log in, use shopping cart, use my order history and all other stuff. So for that, and that's what I said, why we wanted to keep the, so in general, we had this one as part of the Adobe Commerce. So Adobe Commerce is not natively supporting SSO, the single sign-on. So we went to the Adobe Commerce Marketplace and took one of the extensions that been there available, which claimed to be supporting the headless mode, which in the end ended up that's not really supported the headless mode, but that's something we have to live with, and we extended it. So we still took the native extension from Marketplace just because it would save us a lot of time when we doing it, because we don't need to develop it from scratch. But at the same time, we would build the Kicklog, that's a service provider for single sign-on, where the user, when he wants to log in, he's been redirected to Kicklog SSO. If everything going fine, there is a handshake between native Adobe Commerce extension and this Kicklog SSO, and user has been authorized. So in a simple world, if you don't need anything complex, then you don't need a builder on these steps. You can just build it within communication between Adobe Commerce, your storefront, and the SSO provider. For us, we still had to touch the Adobe Builder because there were several edge cases we wanted to cover. First of all is the token invalidation. So in Adobe Commerce, if you're working with GraphQL endpoints and your token is being expired, you just get an unauthorized response. So there are no mechanism to refresh token automatically and user have to re-log in again. We want to avoid it, and for that we built the token exchange mechanism within Adobe Builder extension and Kicklog API. So in the case if token been expired, the user has been sent to the SSO extension of a builder, which doing the exchange of the old token to a new one and issuing the token that user can still log in together. Also, there was some customer metadata that had been stored within Kicklog SSO, and we wanted to keep it up to date. So in case of the customer logging into the system, we fetching the customer metadata from the SSO provider and updating it within Adobe Commerce. And this part is fully built with Adobe Builder. And you can sort why. We for sure started to think what makes sense. If it makes sense to use the PHP extension for this, or it makes sense to use a builder. But all these processes are described, they're more or less out of process. So you don't have hard dependency on the code execution within Adobe Commerce, and you can only rely on the webhooks and on events which happen within Adobe Commerce. By this reason, the decision was not to touch Commerce anymore and just build a small Adobe Builder extension which fully fulfill the requirements. And that's it. So for SSO integration, that was, I would say, the big bunch of work to build all this together, but we still stayed with the standard PHP approach, so native in-process extensibility, as we already had in Marketplace extension. That's one quite important point, so I really hope that in several years the Adobe Exchange Marketplace will have much more extension than now, So this problem will not appear then, and you can just take extension from there. But that's somewhere in the future. The next part for us was stock availability. The same. So we have Adobe Store frontend, which is calling, so he's rendering the PDP pages, the product detail pages, or product listing pages, and we want to show if the product available or not, and then maybe hide or show the Add to Cart button as example. And to do it, we build the service within Adobe Builder that's providing us the information for the customer ID and the SKU of the product, because for us, product stock availability is customer dependent. So your customer is locked in, and customer A may have the product and customer B may don't have a product. For these use cases, we have the service which taking the customer ID and SKU and requesting the data from the PIM, and PIM giving him information if for this customer this product can be purchased or not. And then API mesh is delivered for the storefront. Why API mesh? Because we don't want to have another endpoint to be called. So if you will take example, then you have the standard storefront and you have the PIM, which can do the same, more or less, just returning the stock status. And then you have, let's say, let's do like this, and you have Adobe Commerce. If you will have storefront call the Adobe Commerce for receive the product info, but you don't have the stock information there, you would need separately to call PIM system to get stock information. The issues here, first of all, you have two different services you need to maintain. You have two different endpoints. That's one. The second one, this endpoint can be exposed, so the users may see what are you calling. They may see your PIM, your URL, try to hack it, try to find vulnerabilities, all other stuff. Second point, that the product info have to be called before you fetch in the stock, or at least the storefront have to render it before you fetch in the stock. Yeah. What we achieve with using the API mesh here, the API mesh is literally just returning to the storefront the single URL, the single endpoint. You don't need another endpoint even. So in this case, you would need to call another endpoint then. So here's, let's say, products query, and here will be stock query from third-party system. Here you're still calling just standard products, and the stock availability is within the same response. Even if you want to keep the native Adobe Commerce functionality related to the stock display, and you can just replace the existing stock tags with information received from PIM system, and then you don't need to change the native components, which was not the case of us. We would need to change them a bit to display like a traffic light of the stock. So that was our second integration. The next integration is the customer data validation. This one is a pure backend, this one is a pure front-end action. So when the customer is going to the checkout and entering his data, in our case, it's a B2B customer, so he will enter his company data, and we want to really validate if this company exists. So for this one, when customer on a checkout entering his data and then clicking on the next step, we send in the request to Adobe API Mesh again, and Adobe API Mesh additionally, before submitting it to Adobe Commerce or before proceeding the request, perform the company validation. So it's calling the builder application, which then calling third-party system with required metadata and returning back the response if the company metadata correct or not. Theoretically, you can also do like this, avoiding Adobe Builder, which would also work, depends on which APIs and how it's comfortable to call third-party system, what's data is provided. If it's providing the schema, so you can plug it in on the mesh, theoretically you can call it directly. In our case, it was not the case. And that's it. And then last one but not least, and that's where we already talked, I guess, a lot of time, and if you're curious, you can scroll through the old videos. We already talked about order export integration. So it's literally when the order been placed in Adobe Commerce, we listen for sales order commit after event and then schedule the export to the ERP system. On a message queue base, the order status been saved in Adobe App Builder, and then we send in the data to ERP, and then feedback also coming back, and we updating status if necessary within Adobe Commerce. And it's also been done as an out of process, because there's no sense literally to go to the native Magento extension or to Adobe Commerce extension to build it, or to use even marketplace ready module, and then upgrade it with next Adobe Commerce update if necessary, and to maintain it when the whole this process can build quite easily and quite easy to maintain. And if necessary, and if you have any dashboards, you can also plug it in then into the Adobe Commerce backend. So, and now we'll come back shortly to the global architecture. So in the end, we ended up this setup when we have, as I said, company validation, we have order export, we have product availability, we have customer metadata update from the Kicklog SSO, and all this constellation works together quite well. The product is live already more than half a year. Yes, more than half a year. And what is nice in case if you're doing the Adobe Commerce update, we not much rely on these elements here because they all work it independently and being further developed. So I believe there are already some modifications which I don't know about. And it was quite easy to build this around Adobe Commerce without touching the Adobe Commerce itself. I hope it was curious, and I will be really interested if there any questions will pop up related to the desired solution, if there anything you may be interested in, and if you're going to consider it in your future projects, feel free. I'm here for you. And here as a reminder, if you have any cool projects and any cool architectures, I will be really happy if you can ping me and we can talk about them together. So let's call it open mic, call for speaker, whatever you want to. And please don't forget to subscribe. And I hope we see you in our next episodes of these videos.